Big managerial moves afoot in the EFL Championship. A new face confirmed at Southampton, Will Still. We are expecting a familiar face returning at Leicester in Russell Martin. And discussions about a jump for Liam Manning from Bristol City to Norwich. That is where we are, with the dust only just having settled on the end of the Premier League season, which is obviously highly pertinent when it comes to Southampton and Leicester. And of course, playoff final just having concluded 2 days ago. This is the point. This is the moment where teams are getting their ducks in a row ahead of the 25-26 season. Get your thoughts in the comments on all three of these either confirmed or potential managerial moves going down here. It's bank holiday right now, so you would imagine, I don't know, would anything get announced today? We're probably going to be waiting until tomorrow, but we did get it announced yesterday, in fact, before Southampton played their last game of a miserable Premier League season, that Will Still, who I am contractually obliged to say is 32 years old, extremely young head coach, is going to be taking over at Southampton. I don't know a great deal about Will Still. I know he did a Monday Night Football, didn't he, with Jamie Carragher, so I shall try and go back and give that a watch. Look, we'll know a hell of a lot about him even by the end of August as he joins the maddest, most brilliant league in the world, and Southampton. He's been working in France, I believe, for Reims and Lens. Don't worry about my French pronunciation. It's really not important, is it? But here he comes into English football. And yes, on the one hand, he is young and certainly untried at English football, level. But on the other hand, there is experience there. And then, of course, if he's young, there is huge potential as well. It was going to be interesting to see where Southampton went. Obviously, we're going to talk about Russ Martin in a minute. He is the man that took Southampton up, an immediate bounce back with parachute payments. Not last season, just finished a day ago, but the season before, obviously winning the playoff final thereafter, finishing fourth. Southampton are going to want to do exactly the same thing again. And we'll start the summer, we'll start the season, we'll go to 1 to 24 predictions saying the same thing we always say. If you are a year one parachute team, the expectation is automatic promotion or a near miss and a go at the playoffs. That is the expectation. Obviously, Leeds won it this season in year two of their parachute payments. Burnley bounced in year one. Sheffield United lost out in the playoff final, so they didn't kind of meet those expectations. And Luton, I think, is a different kettle of fish. Indeed, in terms of the way they went up and the fact that there's a stadium needing to be built, and maybe that financial advantage wasn't banked on player salaries and transfer fees like most teams do. So, Will Still, bit of an unknown quantity then in that case. I guess I like the chutzpah of the hire. It did feel like Ivan Juric, the guy who replaced Russ Martin in the Premier League, that just felt not inspired at all. I know they actually came to Portman Road and beat my team, Ipswich, but it felt like they'd gone from the hyper possession style of Martin to kind of just keeping it safe and keeping it away from the goal and seeing if they could get over that points record, that low points record set by Derby County. So it's going to be very, very interesting. Southampton, obviously, as a team that are now yo-yoing, having gone down, up, down, there isn't a Livramento, a Ward-Prowse, etc. there to maybe sell for gargantuan amounts of money. There is the youngster Diblin, who they're asking the earth for. If they get half of what they're asking for him, then that might be the one sale that needs to be made, to just fill the coffers up in the short term. But we're going to look at it, and we're going to look at the likes of Aaron Ramsdale or Taylor Harwood-Bellis. I assume Kyle Walker-Peters will come back down. Adam Armstrong, who is just a complete bagsman at this level. And what we don't know about Will Still, we do know about a lot of the Southampton squad are proven at championship level. The expectation will be automatics or top four and very close in terms of, being in those playoffs. And that makes it difficult. We spoke about this on the Blue Monday podcast I was hosting, and someone asked me, will Will still be Southampton manager at Christmas? It's hard because whether it's a paradigm shift or a couple of outlier seasons, the parachute teams are scoring a gargantuan amount of points. We've obviously had 2 seasons ago, Leicester, Southampton, and Leeds. I'm trying to finger my numbers here. Leicester 97, Leeds possibly 90, was it? And I don't know, 88, 87. Someone will tell me in the comments. And then last season, look, 100, 100, and on pitch 92, obviously with a deduction for Sheffield United. So my long way round to this point is that you need to be close to 2 points per game at the halfway mark of the season if you're a parachute team at the moment, or else it's going to be too difficult. And we saw the example of Sheffield United this season. One horrible week where they lost back-to-back games in a 3-game week in, I think it was like rounds 40, 41, 42. Done. Cooked them, didn't it? That was it. That was the only mistake that they could afford to make against 2 teams who were going to score 100 points. So let me know your thoughts. Will Still in at Southampton. How's he going to do? What do you think of the hire? If you don't like the hire, who do you think would have been a better name? Speaking of, if you don't like the hire, Leicester City. Who's the journalist around there? John Percy, who's pretty damn reliable on things around the the sort of Midlands area and over to, Birmingham. He's normally pretty sharp on this, with the idea and the promise that Ruud van Nistelrooy, who replaced Steve Cooper, is going to be the Leicester City manager next season. Now, I paused when I said an unpopular hire because we've seen this movie before, where the Leicester fans really didn't take to Steve Cooper at the start of this season, who replaced Enzo Maresca after Leicester were promoted in first place from the Championship at the end of last season, 23-24. Cooper didn't last long. It never worked. Van Nistelrooy came in. That really didn't work either. Down they come, and it's going to be Russell Martin, who very, very much divides opinion. And I've got to be very careful here that I don't fall into the same trap that I did with Wayne Rooney, where pretty much universally, all of you guys in the comments were saying, "Oh, that's bad news for Plymouth. I don't fancy that." And I was like, give him a chance. It wasn't all bad at Darby, and there was mitigating factors at Birmingham and ho-hum. And you lot in the comments turned out to be right. Now, Russ Martin has, let's make only the comparison between Russ Martin and Wayne Rooney, that it's a bit Marmite-y and there may be a negative reaction. Russ Martin has an infinitely better track record, but people don't like Russ Martin. Bless him. I do, but I've got a slight amount of bias. I've met the guy. I just like the guy. I found him engaging, and I can see why it works in terms of him talking to owners and players. However, he's this kind of smooth talking, handsome, sound-bitey guy who is very stubbornly connected to this hyper possession style of football. And I think there's a lot of things individually that trigger football supporters. And I think that suite of beliefs that Russ Martin has and exhibits gets the goat of many football fans. Some people argue he's not actually done that much in his career, and I think they use the league positions to kind of as a stick to beat him with. And yeah, you can begin and end your analysis on league position if you want. There's often more nuance to the job somebody has done than merely the league position, although I'm going to say it in a minute. He's going into a parachute team, so it's going to be all about the league position, isn't it? But the point I was making is that MK, he kind of set up the style. And how incestuous is this? We're talking about Russ Martin, who used to manage, who's going to that team probably, used to manage that team, and handed over MK Dons to the manager we're about to talk about, possibly managing that team down there. But he set it all up for Liam Manning to have a great season there. Read into that what you will at MK, whether it was just great groundwork done or whether Manning had the extra to do what Martin couldn't have done. I personally look at it as it was great groundwork done. He went to Swansea, again, I think decent groundwork done there. And, he took obviously Darling, didn't he? And Grimes was there with him, wasn't he? Piru was brought in at that point. There were players developed. There was a very definitive style of football. Okay, excuse me. There was a lot of pain for Swansea in those early days. And this is the cliche, isn't it? That, I don't know. I know it's unfair to say a certain brand of football supporter, because if that's your opinion, that's your opinion. But the idea of circulating the ball around the back, playing quite slowly, focus completely on possession, like it or lump it, literally in terms of lump it forward. But Swansea not able to get into the playoffs, but then, and people have talked to me about failing upwards, middle of the table MK up to middle of the table to Swansea. He got the job at Southampton and he took them up. And when you talk about the expectations, that was the deal. That was the brief. Get Southampton straight back into the Premier League. There were times when it was awkward and the same things again, but there was also a gigantic undefeated streak in the middle of the season. There was also the fact that you had Leicester scoring 97, a complete unicorn of a season that we're unlikely to see again, although Hull might be at Birmingham next season, of a team going straight through, not just straight through, but scoring 96 points, which certainly threw a spanner in the works for the established order in the season. Russ Martin was the Saints manager. Now, Martin received massive criticism in the Premier League for, quote, not adapting. I think there's an element of truth to that on the one side, but I do think there's a lot of nonsense talked about how promoted teams approach the Premier League, like they're just going to play a defensive brand of football and that's going to automatically stop them losing games and, close the massive chasm between the 17 and everybody else, with promoted teams just getting relegated left and right over the years. Look, I think they're the two extremes of the view. The truth, as ever, is somewhere in the middle. Yes, Martin probably didn't get his style quite right, but, this idea that, you've got to go up and learn to defend and don't be so naive. It's like, who's being naive with that comment? Really, it is such a ridiculously difficult job and such a big chasm now between, and especially when it's going to be the same 17 now for 4 seasons, receiving that much TV money and teams going up receiving that much. The longer this run goes, the harder it's going to be. And, the absolute chasms between teams that have had really bad seasons, Palace at times, Everton, West Ham, Man United, Tottenham, Wolves, all have been terrible at times this season and have finished miles above the promoted team. So that's my kind of defence of Russell Martin. There's another nuance to this as well, that Leicester might well get points deduction, mightn't they? We don't quite know what's going to happen. They've been charged by the Premier League in association with the accounts they put forward for 23-24 when they did get promoted, obviously. That's the end of the 3-year rolling period, obviously. And they've been charged for a breach, so losing too much money, not submitting their accounts on time, basically holding them back and keeping it all on the down low, basically, so it can be charged, really. There's another charge as well, not assisting with, I don't know, there's 3 charges, I can't quite remember. I fell over this before in another video, I can't quite remember what the third one is, but there's an argument that Leicester might be deducted points from the Premier League for this season that's just finished. That'll actually, drop them maybe below Ipswich into 19th, which would cost them £3 million, or, God, an even bigger deduction. It feels unlikely that it drop them below Southampton, but there could be that. The points deduction could be deferred into next season. I don't quite know where we lie with jurisdiction in terms of, obviously Leicester ran rings around jurisdiction before, but we now do have the Premier League essentially bring in charges based on a season that didn't actually happen in the Premier League. It's EFL numbers there, which is kind of the right thing, but we've gone round the houses to get there, and Leicester obviously ran rings about that and would have had a deduction for the previous season in this season in the Premier League. Then there's the idea that the EFL are going to be knocking on the door the second that Leicester get back. Now they're back in jurisdiction as well for previous, quote, misdemeanours. So in some way, shape or form, Russ Martin, if and when he's appointed the Leicester boss, may have to deal with a points deduction. And I personally believe the worst thing would be a transfer embargo or an approved business plan, because I think the argument from a lot of people, particularly unhappy Leeds United fans who Leicester kind of, they were the big losers, weren't they? Finished in third, didn't get automatic and then lost in the playoffs. That Leicester, knowing what they knew about their accounts from day zero in the Championship, shouldn't have been able to reject bids for Kiernan Dewsbury Hall and then sign Harry Winks, Connor Cody, Steffi Mavadidi, Mads Hermansen, etc., etc. They probably wouldn't have got a lot of those deals through, or they would have had to, I know they sold Barnes and Mattheson, they would have probably had to sell Dewsbury Hall as well on top of that. Do you know what I mean? It would have been a very different picture. That is, I think, the more severe punishment, rather than, well, you can have a better squad than everyone and pay more salary than everyone, but we're going to deduct your 6 points. Well, what did Burnley have? 100 points, and then Sunderland in fourth had 76, and Sheffield United were 8 back on field, but 10 back in reality with their 2 deductions. So I'm sure if you said to Leicester fans, business as usual, but you get 4 or 6 points deducted, probably take it, wouldn't they? Probably still fancy their chances of being right up there. In terms of the squad they're coming down with, obviously I've already mentioned Mavadidi. Fatawu had a long injury. He was brilliant in the Championship before. I've already mentioned Winks and Cody. Hermansen, maybe he's one that might be sold. El Canoose. But again, the expectation will be, if Russ Martin is Leicester City manager, that he's either in the top 2 or very close and he wins the playoffs. That is the deal. It's boring. I find it boring me saying it, but I've been covering this league a long time, and that is the deal. I think Leicester could do a lot worse than having Russ Martin in there. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. So here's an interesting one, and it's Liam Manning to Norwich. And I think where we are with it, there's been a lot of kind of rumblings coming out. You thought Russ Martin might have fancied the Norwich job, but hey, if you can get parachute job, then take that one, boy. I tell you, being a former Norwich captain, Liam Manning is certainly from that part of the world indeed, and it could be a return back to East Anglia. Let me just say East Anglia there, because people will genuinely not understand that was a joke, and that I don't know the difference between my home. It's not really a county, East Anglia, it's an area. It's Norfolk, where Liam Manning might be headed to replace Johannes Hoth Torrup at Norwich. Now, the question will come in the comments, and it's a perfectly reasonable question. Ben, why would Liam Manning leave Bristol City, who finished here, to go and take over Norwich, who finished here? And it's a good question. I think there's a couple of answers that kind of make sense if he does want to make the jump. One is, if he's a family guy, and it's really hard to talk about, but I think you probably all know, and go and research it, because it's actually painful to talk about what Liam Manning has gone through in his personal life this season as a father. It's just, I cannot imagine it. God, sorry. And there may be, can you just get home and get towards your family? There may be that side of it. That's the emotional side, and only Liam Manning could speak to that. And really, he doesn't have to speak to that. He doesn't owe it to me, you, anyone to explain that if it's linked to the traumatic and frankly just awful events of this past year for him. The other side of it is, I think Norwich are probably still just slightly a better proposition than Bristol City, although you do have Bristol City with momentum. I think there's been quotes from Mr. Lansdowne that they're not going to go wild in the transfer market, and you wonder if Bristol City the summer might look like, I don't know, will Jason Knight get sold? He was fantastic last season, wasn't he? And then you'll have to retool and sign some players and do some more business. That's where we are with PSR. Whereas at Norwich, okay, you're probably going to lose 2 out of the 3 of Sargent, Sainz and Nunez, but you're going to get a hell of a lot of money in for those 3. And it feels like Norwich's books look vaguely all right. And there were some youngsters kind of brought in and some signings last season that bedded in Cordoba. Cernak. They signed someone from Switzerland as well. Young guy, spent good money on these guys. They're going to be ready to go. And you're probably going to be able to spend... You might be the guy who can go sign Jason Knight if you get 15, 20, whatever million you're going to get for Sainz or Sargent or both. And one thing we know about Norwich... they have been the masters at recruiting and selling. It used to be Bristol City, didn't it, with Brentford, Bristol City. But you think of the likes of Webster and Reed and Brownhill and Kelly, made a ton of money, Bristol City. Norwich, very good at it as well over the years. When you think of a Mattheson, Buendia, Godfrey, Aarons, Lewis, and it'll now be... who was the lad? Brazilian midfielder who went to Turkey last year. Can't remember his name. Very, very good player. Comments are screaming at me right now. It's gone. Big, nice afro haircut. What was his name? Very good player. Can't remember. It'll come to me later in the day. But Norwich are very, very good at selling. And does that give Liam Manning a better gig in terms of... Well, I think it's probably an objective fact that Norwich will have more to invest in salary and transfer fees and probably have a more competitive squad than Bristol City will. But again, Norwich have negative momentum. Bristol City have positive momentum. I don't know. Does it even itself out? It certainly will not be a popular jump. Don't think it'll quite be like the John Eustace one from Blackburn all the way down to Darby, but Mr. Eustace made that work. But people are definitely going to be saying to me, why has he done that? But those are the reasons I would give. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. We are getting the lay of the land on Championship 25-26. We know it'll be Will Still. We think it's going to be Russ Martin in there. It will probably be Liam Manning, or certainly if they've gone in and they're ready to pay the compensation and ready to break glass in case of emergency at Bristol City. So look, plenty of other gigs to be sorted out as well. QPR, that needs to be fixed. Sheffield Wednesday rumbles on with Mr. Roll and Mr. Chansiri there. Hull is still open, isn't it? So still a few things to be sorted out. This looks like the first teams to go, so get your thoughts in the comments down there on the Championship managerial movers. Early. I remember we were talking about Hull, in fact, right at this date last season when Rasidia went out, and it's okay. We're getting ready already for next season before we're even in the month of June. It's all go. Get in the comments on that and have a little look up there. I was there at the biggest game in football, and we saw the £200 million goal from Tommy Watson to send Sunderland from the EFL into the Premier League with a 2-1 win over Sheffield United. You can see my vlog on events from Wembley. Go and get involved there. Let me know about this manager stuff. And we'll hopefully be back with Mr. Parkin and the final Championship check-in of the season tomorrow or Wednesday. Enjoy your bank holiday.